Welcome to today's Explainer. We are jumping right into a massive paradigm shift today regarding the very foundation of the church. You know, for a lot of us, the way we talk about the institutions we belong to reveals a whole lot about how we view ourselves and our role in them. But when it comes to the church, there is a fundamental difference between human ambition and divine architecture. So today we're going to explore why relying on our own human effort completely misses the mark. And we'll uncover the beautiful, sovereign way God actually builds His people from the ground up. Let's get started.
Think about it for a second. Who built this church? It seems like a surprisingly simple question, right? But what's absolutely fascinating is how often we answer it incorrectly without even realizing it. It's become totally normal in our circles to hear someone casually say, well, we built this church, or I planted that church over there. But honestly, there is a really dangerous trap hidden right inside those everyday phrases. When we use that kind of language, we are subtly putting ourselves right at the center of the story. We unknowingly assume the position of the master and the owner. It might sound like harmless ambition at first, but it's actually rooted in a human-centric pride that completely ignores God's sovereignty.
And that brings us to the core contrast we'll be exploring throughout this explainer. On one side, we've got human effort, human planning, and human ambition. It's essentially the mindset of a CEO trying to construct a corporate organization through sheer willpower and clever strategy. But on the exact opposite side, we have God's sovereign work. Because the true biblical reality is that the church is never just an organization built by human strategy. It's a living, breathing organism created entirely by the life-giving work of God. It really isn't about what we can achieve with our hands or our intellect. It is entirely about what God sovereignly does with His.
To understand this deeply, we have to go straight to the foundation. In Matthew chapter 16, verse 18, Jesus makes one of the most defining declarations in history. He says, "And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it." Now, I want you to notice the pronouns Jesus chooses here. They are absolutely crucial. He doesn't say you will build the church or we're going to build this together as a team. No, he explicitly says, I will build my church. Jesus is the sole architect. Just before this, Peter had confessed that Jesus is the Christ, but Jesus immediately pointed out that this brilliant realization didn't come from Peter's human wisdom. Actually, it was a direct, sovereign revelation from God the Father. To really hammer home that humans literally cannot be the foundation, let's just look at Peter's rapid downward spiral right after that incredible spiritual high point. He moves from this amazing, spirit-led confession straight into actively opposing Jesus going to the cross. And then, well, it culminates in his total, heartbreaking denial of Christ on the very night of the crucifixion. This staggering progression perfectly illustrates our human frailty. I mean, Peter's name might mean rock, but in his human nature, he was merely a pebble. Human flesh and blood is simply too frail, too fickle, and way too flawed to ever bear the crushing weight of being the foundation of the church. The crucial concept here is what the source text calls flesh and blood. This represents our human effort, our mortal thoughts, and our inherent limitations. Remember when Peter opposed the cross? Jesus actually rebuked him with shocking intensity. He said, "Get behind me, Satan." Now, why so harsh? Because Peter was thinking exactly like a human being. He was relying entirely on his own flesh and blood instead of divine revelation. To truly be part of God's church, our old human nature, our pride, and our self-serving ambitions, they have to be entirely crucified. Like Galatians 2:20 reminds us, our old self must die so that Christ can live in us. There's just no room for human ego in divine construction.
So if human flesh and blood can't build it, who does? Well, that brings us to Section 1, the Trinitarian Blueprint, Collaborative Divine Action.
As you can see, building the church is actually a beautifully unified master plan executed by the Trinity. First, God the Father is the one who initiates. He reveals the truth and awakens our hearts, just like he did for Peter. Then, God the Son lays the unshakable foundation through his cross and resurrection. He's the ultimate cornerstone. And finally, God the Holy Spirit takes us, the believers, and actively builds us together into a living temple. The Father, Son, and Holy Spirit are working in perfect, seamless unity, and this proves, without a shadow of a doubt, that the church is an organism created by a divine blueprint. It has absolutely nothing to do with human organization.
I want you to really lean in and focus on this quote from Ephesians 2:22, because it truly captures the absolute core theme of our explainer today. And in him, you two are being built together to become a dwelling in which God lives by his Spirit. Did you catch the phrasing there? You are being built
It's passive. We aren't the builders holding the hammers and the blueprints. We are the materials. The Holy Spirit is the active builder. Just think about the incredible process of how the Spirit takes us, people with vastly different backgrounds, deep flaws, jagged edges, and sovereignly shapes us. He fits us perfectly together to create a holy, unified dwelling place for God. It is an entirely sovereign process of spiritual construction where we just get to yield to His master craftsmanship.
So knowing all that, knowing that God is the sovereign builder, and we are simply the materials being shaped, how should we respond? Let's shift gears from the theological mechanics to the practical reality of our daily lives in Section 2, our posture, standing in the Spirit. The source material beautifully outlines 4 distinct spiritual postures that the Holy Spirit actually empowers us to take. First up is faith. We are called to completely take our eyes off of human leaders and brilliant church growth strategies and fix them exclusively on Jesus. Second is endurance. When we feel exhausted or burnt out in ministry, we don't dig into our own human grit. We remember Christ's suffering so we don't lose heart. Third is hope. Now, this isn't some fragile, manufactured human optimism. It's a profound hope that overflows entirely by the power of the Spirit. And fourth, love. We dwell in God's love because God Himself is love. You see, we can't generate these postures on our own. They are the direct, natural result of standing in the Spirit.
And you know what's amazing? When we adopt those 4 postures, it naturally leads to an incredible freedom. 1 Thessalonians 5 tells us to rejoice always, pray continually, and give thanks in all circumstances. Now, why is that? Because the pressure is finally off. When you realize that you are simply a grateful participant in God's masterpiece and not the exhausted architect desperately trying to hold the roof up, joy is literally the only logical response. Living a prayerful, thankful lifestyle is the absolute natural result of surrendering completely to God's sovereign work. We can rest, simply knowing the builder is fully capable of completing His own house.
This brings us to a really stark comparison that demands a response from every single one of us today. My church versus God's church. This is a direct challenge to every church leader and every believer. We have to drop the pride. We really need to stop boasting about our personal ministry achievements, our clever growth strategies, and our impressive attendance numbers. Instead, we have to humbly confess that we are not the masters, and we certainly aren't the owners of the church. Jesus Christ is the only head. Everything we have and everything we get to be a part of is purely a gift of His grace. It's time to shift our vocabulary and our hearts away from "look what I built" and toward a reverent, awestruck "look what God is doing."
To truly cement this truth in our hearts, just listen to these incredible lyrics from the song "You Build the Church," which was referenced in the source text. Not our design, but yours, the Master's plan. You build the church with your own nail-scarred hand. Let those words really sink in for a second. The church wasn't purchased with a clever business plan. It wasn't built through a massive fundraising campaign. It was bought and built by the ultimate sacrifice of Jesus Christ. His nail-scarred hands lay the unshakable foundation. It is His design, His sacrifice, and it is for His glory alone. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to consider today. Whose church is yours? Are you constantly exhausting yourself, relying on your own human ambition and strategy? Or are you standing in quiet awe of the sovereign builder? It's my true hope that today's explainer sparks a lasting paradigm shift for you, freeing you from that exhausting cycle of human effort and inviting you into the joyful, humble reality that God alone is the one building His church. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive. Keep fixing your eyes on Him, and I'll see you next time.